People often think silence is weakness, that when you don't argue back, don't slam tables, don't speak up in meetings, you're a shadow. They don't understand. It's the shadows that stay closest to them. I was the employee who processed financial data. Invisible, nameless, and the reason an entire multi-million-dollar corporation collapsed. My name is Justine Keller, 34 years old, Missouri born and raised. State University graduate with a degree that meant everything to my parents and nothing to the corporate world. I wasn't the valedictorian. I wasn't the one professors remembered. I was the kind of person who sat in the middle rows, turned in assignments on time, and graduated with a GPA that whispered rather than shouted. At Clinton Maritide Group, I was exactly what they wanted, competent enough to trust with numbers, invisible enough to ignore. The Dallas headquarters sprawled across 3 glass buildings that caught the Texas sun like a promise of success. Inside, we were sorted into a careful hierarchy where everyone knew their place. Mine was on the 7th floor, northwest corner, far from the executive suites but close enough to the server room to hear its constant hum. My official title was Financial Data Analyst, which meant I reconciled internal statements, cross-checked inventory reports, and made sure the numbers told the story management wanted them to tell. I didn't attend strategy meetings. I didn't golf with clients. I was just staff. As Harold Kavanaugh liked to remind me during our weekly check-ins. "Remember, Justine," he'd say, leaning back in his chair that cost more than my monthly rent. "We hired you to process, not to think." The office culture at Clinton Maritide was built on an unspoken contract. Loyalty bought silence, silence bought stability. We had good benefits, decent pay, and the kind of job security that let you plan for a mortgage. In exchange, you learned to look the other way when shipping manifests didn't quite match, when fuel costs seemed inflated, when the same invoice appeared twice with slightly different dates. My life outside those glass walls was deliberately small. A 1-bedroom apartment in Uptown. Sunday farmers' markets, a cat named Douglas who judged my microwave dinners. I'd learned that ambition was expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. Better to be reliable Justine. Quiet Justine, Justine who never caused problems. It was a Tuesday in March when I first noticed the pattern. Not because I was looking for it, I trained myself not to look too hard at anything. But numbers have their own language, and this one was screaming. The fuel insurance reimbursements for our Pacific Northwest routes were duplicating. Not obviously, the entries were scattered across different budget categories, different regional reports. But when you spend 8 hours a day swimming in spreadsheets, you develop an instinct for rhythms that don't belong. At first, I assumed it was my mistake. I ran the reports again, checked my formulas, verified the source data. The duplications were still there, hidden in plain sight like a virus that had learned to mimic healthy cells. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Douglas, purring in my lap, and stared at the printouts I'd smuggled home. Each duplicate represented thousands of dollars. Multiply that across quarters, across regions, and you weren't looking at an error anymore. You were looking at a system. The duplications haunted me every morning. I'd arrive at my desk and pull up the databases, watching the numbers multiply like cancer cells. Pacific Northwest routes showed fuel insurance reimbursements of $47,000 on March 3rd. The same amount appeared again on March 7th, buried in a subsidiary ledger. Then $62,000 for the mountain region, doubled. The Gulf Coast operations, tripled across 3 different accounting periods. I started keeping a private log, encrypted on a USB drive I wore around my neck like a digital albatross. 6 months of data collection taught me patience I didn't know I possessed. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Legitimate reimbursement claims were processed normally, then resubmitted through shell vendor accounts with slightly altered documentation. Unless you were looking at the entire ecosystem of transactions, you'd never spot it. Harold Kavanaugh controlled which reports reached upper management. Every Thursday, he'd sweep through our floor like a small-town king, collecting our analyses and deciding what deserved attention. He had a particular way of standing behind my chair, close enough that I could smell his aftershave, something expensive and sharp that made my throat close. Still finding those discrepancies, Justine? He asked one afternoon, his reflection looming in my monitor. Just formatting issues. I lied, minimizing the spreadsheet that showed $3.2 million in suspicious transactions. Good. Remember, we're not forensic accountants. We're not heroes. We're processors. His hand landed on my shoulder, a weight that felt heavier than flesh and bone. Don't make trouble where there isn't any. The paranoia crept in slowly. I started noticing the security camera's red lights, counting how many times the IT department accessed my workstation remotely. My badge access logs were reviewed weekly, standard procedure, they said, but I knew better. I developed habits that felt like scenes from a spy movie, arriving early to check for disturbed papers, using different routes to the parking garage, clearing my browser history obsessively. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd lie in bed calculating if the fuel insurance fraud was netting them $203 million per quarter. And it had been running for at least 2 years. We were looking at $16.24 million minimum. But that was just one scheme. What else was hidden in those numbers? The physical toll showed I lost 15 pounds, developed a tremor in my left hand, started grinding my teeth until my dentist prescribed a night guard. Carla from Accounts Payable noticed first. You look like hell, she said, sliding a coffee across the break room table. Everything okay? I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to share the weight of what I knew. But I'd watched enough people get quietly transferred or suddenly laid off to know that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford either. Just haven't been sleeping well, I said. Maybe you should take some time off. Use those vacation days. But I couldn't. Every day I stayed was another piece of evidence collected, another pattern documented. I was building a case file that would either save or destroy me. The USB drive grew heavier around my neck, its contents expanding, spreadsheets, email chains, PDF reports with highlighting that mapped a constellation of corporate theft. By month 6, I had it all. The fraud totaled $82 million across multiple schemes. Fuel insurance was just the beginning. There were phantom maintenance charges, inflated shipping fees, even a subsidiary that existed only on paper but somehow generated millions in tax credits. The night I finished compiling everything, I sat in my apartment with Douglas and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This felt special enough. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide, stay silent and stay safe, or speak up and lose everything. The wine tasted bitter. Or maybe that was just the flavor of complicity finally becoming unbearable. The decision to speak up died 1,000 deaths before I finally made it. I tried Carla first, catching her alone in the parking garage after everyone else had left. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting shadows that made her face look hollow when I showed her the evidence. Jesus, Justine. Her hands shook as she handed back the papers. You can't show me this. I can't know this. But it's millions. Carla. They're stealing. Stop. She was already backing toward her car. I have 2 kids, a mortgage. My husband just got diagnosed with MS. I can't. I won't be part of this. She drove away without looking back, leaving me standing under those harsh lights with my proof of crimes that apparently no one wanted to see. My next attempt was Marcus, an old college friend who worked at a Big 4 accounting firm. We met at a diner 40 miles outside Dallas, a place where truckers stopped for coffee and no one from Clinton Maritide would ever appear. I slid the USB drive across the cracked Formica table. I need you to look at this. Tell me if I'm crazy. He plugged it into his laptop right there between the coffee refills and pie. His expression shifted from skeptical to concerned, to something I can only describe as afraid. You're not crazy, he said quietly, sliding the drive back. But you need to be very careful. This is career-ending stuff. For them, sure, but also for you. Whistleblowers don't exactly get victory parades. So what do I do? Honestly, update your resume and pretend you never saw any of it. The weight of their fear pressed down on me. These were good people, smart people, and they were choosing blindness because sight was too expensive. I understood. I'd been making the same choice for years. The paranoia intensified after my conversations. Harold started calling me into his office for performance reviews that felt more like interrogations. Did I enjoy my work? Was I happy with my role? Had I noticed anything unusual in my reports lately? "You seem stressed," he said during one session, tapping a gold pen against his desk. "Maybe the workload is too much. We could redistribute some of your accounts." Translation: "We could cut off your access to the evidence." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Just the usual end-of-quarter pressure." The breaking point came through a technical accident. I'd been working on a particularly complex reconciliation when I accidentally restored a deleted file from the shared drive. It was a draft email from Harold to the CFO, discussing containment strategies and mentioning my name specifically. They knew I knew. They were deciding what to do about it. My hands didn't shake anymore. The tremor had been replaced by something harder, colder. I worked through that night with mechanical precision, creating a backup of my backup, organizing everything into a package that even a first-year analyst could understand. The next 3 days were a performance. I arrived on time, smiled in the hallways, submitted reports that showed nothing unusual. Inside, I was screaming. Every interaction felt like a test. Every closed-door meeting I wasn't part of felt like a tribunal deciding my fate. On Thursday night, they kept me late. An urgent project that required my specific expertise. I sat at my desk until 1 a.m., working on meaningless busy work while Harold's office light stayed on down the hall. He was waiting. For what? I didn't know. But I could feel the trap closing. When he finally came to check on me, his smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Still here, Justine? Such dedication." "Just finishing up," I said, saving the worthless file I'd been pretending to analyze. "Good, good." Ears. He stood too close again, looking at my screen. "You know, I've always appreciated how thorough you are, how you notice things others might miss." "Thank you. It's a valuable skill, in the right context." His emphasis on those last words felt like a blade against my throat. But sometimes, the most valuable skill is knowing when to stop looking. That's when I knew. Tomorrow, I wouldn't have a job. Or worse, I'd have a job but no access, no evidence, no way to prove what I'd seen. They'd bury me in busy work or bureaucracy until I either quit or went crazy. I saved my file, logged off, and gathered my things with movements that felt like they belonged to someone else. Harold watched me go, still smiling that predator's smile. "Have a good night, Justine. See you tomorrow." But he wouldn't. Because I was done being prey, I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Douglas watching from his perch, and I planned. Not revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't looking for satisfaction or vindication. I was simply exhausted. Exhausted from carrying secrets that burned like acid in my chest. Exhausted from pretending I didn't see the rot beneath Clinton Meritide's polished surface. The plan formed itself with the clarity that comes from having no other choice. I'd already done the hard work. 6 months of meticulous documentation sat encrypted on multiple drives. Now I needed to weaponize it. First, I created the whistleblower report. Not the dense technical document I'd been building, but something clean and devastating. Executive summary. $82 million in fraudulent transactions. Key players identified with evidence. Transaction trails mapped with the precision of a surgeon. I wrote it in language that even a burned-out SEC investigator could understand after 3 cups of coffee. Then came the harder part, finding someone who would listen. The SEC had a whistleblower portal, but I knew enough about bureaucracy to understand that online submissions could disappear into digital limbo. I needed a human connection. That's when I remembered Leo McCarthy. We'd been in the same statistics class at Missouri State, and he'd gone on to become an investigative journalist. Not the famous kind. He wrote for a financial crimes blog that most people had never heard of. But he had connections, and more importantly, he had a reputation for protecting sources. I called him from a burner phone I'd bought with cash at a truck stop. Leo, it's Justine Keller. From college. Justine? There was surprise in his voice, maybe pleasure. It's been, 10 years? 12? Listen, I need to ask you something. If someone had evidence of major corporate fraud, hypothetically, what would be the smartest way to ensure it reached the right people? The pause on his end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. How major are we talking? 8 figures, minimum. Jesus. Another pause. Can you get to Austin? We met at a coffee shop near the University of Texas campus, surrounded by students who had no idea their lattes were being consumed 10 feet from evidence of massive corporate theft. Leo looked older, grayer, but his eyes were sharp when I slid the USB drive across the table. Everything's on there, I said. Reports, analysis, evidence trails. I've also prepared a summary that... Stop! He held up a hand. Don't tell me anything else. Not yet. He pocketed the drive. Give me 48 hours to verify some of this. If it checks out, I know someone at the SEC's Fort Worth office, someone who actually gives a damn. What about the story? Story comes second. First, we make sure you're protected. He studied my face. You look like hell, by the way. So everyone keeps telling me. I drove back to Dallas feeling lighter and heavier simultaneously. The die was cast, as they say. All I could do now was wait and maintain the facade. The next morning, I called in sick. First time in 3 years. Harold left 2 voicemails that I didn't return. I spent the day creating redundancies, copies sent to a lawyer friend with instructions to release if anything happened to me. Encrypted files uploaded to secure cloud services, a detailed timeline hidden in a safety deposit box. Paranoid? Maybe. But I'd learned that paranoia was just pattern recognition dressed in anxiety's clothes. Leo called exactly 48 hours later. It's solid, he said without preamble. My contact wants to meet you, tomorrow, 2 p.m., Federal Building in Fort Worth. Ask for Special Agent Sarah Chen at the security desk. Will you be there? I'll be nearby. Listen, Justine, after tomorrow, things are going to move fast. Are you ready for that? I thought about Harold's predator smile, about Carla's frightened retreat, about the weight of secrets I'd carried until my shoulders ached with them. I've been ready for 6 months. That night, I packed a go bag. Clothes, cash, important documents, Douglas's favorite toys. I wasn't planning to run, but I'd learned to prepare for contingencies. I sent emails to a few friends, vague messages about taking some time off, maybe traveling. The morning I was supposed to return to work, I called Harold directly. I'm not feeling well, I said, letting exhaustion color my voice. It wasn't hard. I think I need a few more days. Justine. His voice was cold. We need you here. There are concerns about your recent work. I'll be back soon. I lied. See that you are. We have a lot to discuss. I hung up and looked at Douglas, who was washing his paws with typical feline indifference to human drama. Well, boy, I said, let's go blow up my life. The Federal Building in Fort Worth loomed like a concrete guardian of justice. I met with Special Agent Sarah Reeves in a windowless room that smelled of burnt coffee and old paper. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every nervous tic I couldn't quite suppress. Ms. Keller, she said, spreading my documents across the table. This is extensive work. How long have you been collecting this? 6 months? And you came forward because? I thought about lying, spinning some noble narrative about civic duty. Instead, I told the truth. Because I'm tired. And because they know I know. She nodded, making notes. We spent 4 hours going through everything, line by line. She asked questions that proved she understood exactly what she was looking at. By the end, my throat was raw and my hands had finally stopped shaking. We'll need to move quickly, she said. Once we start requesting documents officially, they'll know something's up. Are you prepared for that? Yes. I mean it. Your life is about to become very complicated. I almost laughed, as if it hadn't been complicated already. The next morning, I went to work. It felt surreal, walking through those glass doors, knowing what was coming. I sat at my desk, opened my usual programs, and began my usual routines. Around me, the office hummed with its typical Tuesday energy. Harold passed by once, didn't stop, but I felt his eyes on me like cold fingers. The first sign came at 10:47 a.m. A security guard appeared near the executive elevator, then another by the main entrance. By 11:15, there were men in dark suits walking through the halls with the kind of purposeful stride that made everyone stop typing. I kept working, spreadsheet cells filled with numbers that no longer mattered. My hands moved on autopilot while my peripheral vision tracked the gathering storm. 11:32 a.m. Harold's assistant rushed past, face pale, arms full of boxes. 11:45 a.m. Shouting from the CFO's office, a door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. 11:58 a.m. Two agents stopped at my desk. Ms. Keller, we need you to step away from your computer. I complied, standing slowly. Around me, the entire floor had gone silent. Dozens of eyes tracked my movement as the agents escorted me to a small conference room. Not arrested, protected. But my coworkers didn't know that. Through the glass walls, I watched the raid unfold. Agents swarmed the executive floor. Computers were tagged and bagged. Boxes of documents wheeled out on dollies. And through it all, I sat in that fishbowl room, invisible and hypervisible simultaneously. Harold was arrested at 2:17 p.m. I watched them walk him out in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Our eyes met for 1 second as they passed. The predator's smile was gone, replaced by something raw and hateful. Then he was gone, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just empty. The CFO went next, then two senior VPs. The building erupted in whispers, theories, panic. Email access was cut, phones were collected. Federal agents set up a command center in the main conference room. Agent Reeves appeared around 4 p.m. You did good, she said simply. We have what we need. What happens now? Now you go home. Try to get some sleep. The investigation will take months, maybe years. But the hard part, for you, is over. She was wrong about that. I was allowed to collect my personal items under supervision. The journey from the conference room to my desk felt like walking through a museum of my former life. Some coworkers looked at me with curiosity, others with suspicion. A few wouldn't look at me at all. Carla was standing by her desk, clutching a coffee mug like a lifeline. Our eyes met across the cubicle farm. She knew. They all knew. Or would soon enough. The quiet analyst who'd blown it all up. I packed my few personal items, a photo of Douglas, a coffee mug from a conference I'd attended 3 years ago, a small cactus that had somehow survived the fluorescent wilderness. Everything fit in a single box. 5 years of my life, condensed to something I could carry with one arm. The security guard escorted me to the parking garage. My badge was confiscated at the final checkpoint. The magnetic doors that had opened for me thousands of times would never open again. I sat in my car for a long moment, box in the passenger seat, engine running. Through the garage entrance, I could see news vans already gathering. Tomorrow, Clinton Maritide Group would be headlines. Major fraud uncovered at Dallas logistics firm. SEC raids corporate offices. Whistleblower exposes $82 million scheme. My phone buzzed. Leo, you did it. Call me when you're ready to talk. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I drove home through Dallas traffic, just another commuter on a Tuesday afternoon. The radio played its usual mix of pop songs and traffic reports. The sun beat down on the concrete. Life went on, indifferent to the small earthquake I'd triggered. That night, Douglas curled up on my lap while I stared at my laptop screen. My corporate email was already deactivated. My LinkedIn showed numerous profile views, 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters, probably. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, stroking Douglas's fur. Tomorrow would bring chaos. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, the weight around my neck was gone. The aftermath arrived in waves. First came the media storm, reporters calling, emailing, even showing up at my apartment complex until building security intervened. I stayed inside, living on delivery groceries and watching my former life dissected on the evening news. Leo's article ran on day 3, carefully protecting my identity while laying out the fraud's anatomy with surgical precision. Then came the isolation. Word spread through Dallas's insular corporate network faster than any SEC investigation. I was radioactive. Former colleagues who'd smiled at me in hallways now crossed streets to avoid eye contact. My LinkedIn messages shifted from recruiter interest to silence. One anonymous email simply read, "Hope it was worth it, snitch." The threatening notes started appearing 2 weeks later. Nothing actionable. The FBI agent assigned to monitor my safety explained they were careful about that. Just suggestions, implications. A photo of my car in the parking lot. A mention of what time I usually walked to the mailbox. Someone had keyed traitor into my Honda's passenger door. We can't prove who's doing it, Agent Reeves told me during one of our check-ins. Could be former employees. Could be people who lost money when the stock tanked. Are you sure you don't want to consider relocation? But where would I go? This was my life. Pathetic as it might be. My apartment, my routines, my favorite coffee shop where the barista now served me with nervous glances. The investigation's scope kept expanding. That initial $82 million. Just the tip. Forensic accountants uncovered threads leading to offshore accounts, political kickbacks, a web of corruption that touched half the transportation industry in the Southwest. Each revelation in the news felt like another brick added to my isolation wall. Carla found me at the grocery store one evening, both of us frozen by the organic produce. "Justine," she said quietly, "I wanted to. I should have. It's fine." I lied. "They fired me anyway, said they needed to restructure. My husband thinks it's because I knew you." She laughed bitterly. "Guilt by association. I'm sorry." "Are you? Really?" Her voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. "Because from where I'm standing, you got to be the hero while the rest of us got fucked." She left without buying anything. I stood there holding a head of lettuce, wondering if heroism was supposed to feel this hollow. The legal proceedings dragged on. Depositions where lawyers tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee. A woman scorned, a corporate climber who'd found a shortcut. I answered their questions in the same monotone I'd once used to explain spreadsheet formulas. Yes, I'd collected the evidence. Yes, I'd given it to authorities. No, I hadn't been promised anything in return. "Why then?" Harold's defense attorney asked during one particularly grueling session. "Why throw away your career?" I thought about explaining the weight of knowing, the exhaustion of complicity, the simple human limit of how much rot you can swallow before you choke. Instead, I said, because the numbers were wrong. He had no follow-up for that. 6 months after the raid, the final tally emerged. $127 million in fraud over 7 years, 16 indictments. Harold got 12 years federal time. The CFO got 15. Clinton Maritide Group dissolved into bankruptcy, taking 400 jobs with it. I became a footnote in most stories about the case. A whistleblower, or an internal source. Never a name. Rarely a human being who still had to buy groceries and pay rent in a city where everyone knew exactly who'd pulled the trigger. The job search was futile. My reputation preceded me everywhere. Too honest for the corporations still running schemes, too dangerous for the legitimate ones. Who wants to hire someone willing to burn down their own house? I started doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses, working from my apartment. Douglas, my only coworker. The pay was a fraction of my old salary. But the spreadsheets were clean. No hidden duplicates, no phantom vendors, no weight pressing on my chest. One morning, I found an envelope under my door. No postmark, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You can sleep at night. Can you live with the ghosts? I looked at Douglas, who yawned with feline indifference. What do you think, boy? Can we live with ghosts? He purred and rubbed against my leg. The only answer I was likely to get. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash with the others. Ghosts were nothing compared to the weight of knowing and doing nothing. My phone rang, another unknown number I wouldn't answer. Through my window, Dallas sprawled under the morning sun, all glass and promises, full of secrets I no longer had to keep. The ghost could get in line. I had invoices to process, numbers to reconcile, a small life to rebuild from the ashes of the old one. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't satisfying, but it was clean. And after everything, clean was enough. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, mixed in with utility bills and grocery circulars. No return address. But the handwriting was careful, deliberate. Inside, a single question on cream-colored paper. Can you sleep peacefully after everything? I stood in my kitchen, Douglas weaving between my legs, and considered the question. Could I sleep? The night terrors had stopped months ago. The paranoid checking of locks had faded. But peaceful. That suggested something beyond the mere absence of guilt. My resignation letter to Dallas was simple. A forwarded lease termination, utilities cancellation, change of address forms, no dramatic goodbye, no final statement. I'd learned that the most profound changes often came quietly, without fanfare. The train to Oregon departed at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd chosen it over flying because I wanted to watch Texas disappear slowly, mile by mile, rather than all at once. Douglas traveled in a carrier beside me, occasionally voicing his displeasure at the arrangement. Through the window, Dallas shrank to a skyline, then a memory. The landscape shifted from urban sprawl to empty plains to mountains I'd only seen in photographs. Each mile felt like shedding skin. I'd found the job posting by accident. A small logistics company in Portland needed someone to overhaul their accounting system. During the phone interview, the owner had been refreshingly direct. I know who you are, she'd said. What you did at Clinton, that's actually why I want you. I need someone who won't look the other way. It wasn't redemption, it was just work. But it was honest work. And that felt like everything. The train pulled into Portland's Union Station on a gray morning that smelled like rain and possibility. I collected Douglas and our few bags, stepping onto the platform with the strange lightness of someone with no reputation preceding them. My new apartment was small but had windows facing Mount Hood. I unpacked slowly, placing each item with the deliberation of someone building a life from scratch. The photo of Douglas went on the mantel. The salvaged office cactus went by the kitchen window. Everything else was new, purchased with the meager remains of my savings, each piece chosen because it carried no memories. That first night, I sat on the floor with takeout Chinese and watched the city lights below. Douglas explored his new territory with typical feline authority, already claiming the best spots for afternoon naps. My phone buzzed. Leo. Checking in as he did every few weeks. How's the new place? Quiet, I typed back. Good quiet. Any regrets? I thought about Harold in federal prison, about Carla's bitter accusation, about 400 people who'd lost their jobs when Clinton collapsed, about the weight of numbers that didn't add up and the heavier weight of pretending they did. No, I replied. No regrets. The next morning, I took the bus to my new office. It was smaller than Clinton's bathroom, housed in a converted warehouse that still smelled faintly of timber. My desk faced a window overlooking the Columbia River, where container ships moved with ponderous grace. I opened my laptop and began reviewing their accounts. The numbers were a mess, but an honest mess, incompetence rather than malice. Fixable, clean. Outside, a container ship's horn echoed across the water. I watched it navigate the channel, steady and sure, carrying its cargo to destinations unknown. There was something peaceful about the certainty of its movement, the honesty of its purpose. My phone vibrated. Another unknown number, probably another reporter or documentarian wanting to rehash the Clinton story. I let it go to voicemail and turned back to my screen. The work was simple, numbers in columns, waiting to be reconciled. No hidden meanings, no double entries, no secrets encoded in spreadsheet cells. Just mathematics in its purest form, as honest as gravity. I thought about the anonymous notes question. Could I sleep peacefully? Last night, I'd slept 9 hours straight. Douglas purring beside me, rain pattering against windows that faced a mountain instead of glass towers full of secrets. If that wasn't peace, it was close enough. The container ship had passed from view, but others would follow. They always did, carrying their loads through fog and darkness, guided by lights that marked safe passage. I turned back to my work, fingers finding their rhythm on the keyboard. Somewhere in Texas, my ghosts were probably still sending their notes to an empty apartment. Let them. I had numbers to balance, a cat to feed. A small life to tend in a city that knew nothing of who I used to be. The rain started again, soft against the windows. I made myself a cup of coffee and got back to work, reconciling accounts in the gray Portland morning, finally understanding that sometimes the most profound revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just living clean in a place where the rain washes everything new. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts. Your perspectives and experiences mean everything to this community.